recall last lecture, I went and talked about the Buildings as Batteries project here on campus. I mean, I went through and talked about, the obsession with batteries right now. Why California wants batteries for regulation. And then I said, maybe I'll talk about like the work I did that got this Google Research Award. But then it's sort of there's a tension here because, I don't want to just give you lectures on my own research. It's supposed to be about fundamental ideas that will last forever. And, but then yesterday I was on a conference called Florida Power and Light. And they're throwing their entire souls into this, I found out. So it turns out they want to use pool pumps for frequency regulation. And I think it's because of me. I think Florida Power and Light.
Oh, yeah.
Because I gave a lecture to them 2 years ago about my project, on pool. They have a gigawatt max load from pools in Florida. So it's like peak load today is probably 30 gigawatts. And if all the pools turn on at once, it'd be a gigawatt load. It's nuts. And they've got 800,000 customers who've signed up with their on-call program, and they can go switch and turn off all those 800,000 pools at once, and on water heaters as well. And so 2 years ago, I gave a lecture in Juneau, Florida. Juneau, is it? I mean,
Juneau Beach.
Yeah.
That's where the headquarters are.
And I was telling them, hey, God, this is such a cool resource. You could do so much more. And the head of research said, we've been thinking about these ideas too. I'm sure, I don't know if that's true or not. But anyway, so I was on this teleconference yesterday, and it totally inspired me to give a lecture on more of unloads, And so I have their patent pending. So all the stuff on buildings with ProBeer, we filed patents for back in 2012. It's right after FERC Order 755 came out. And as soon as we found out we might be selected for this Google Research Award, we ran to the patent office on campus, terrified of Google, that they would just, rip us off blind. And so also that's patented as well. But I think I'm going to try to present this in a way so it is universal. I'm not going to just present my own research. Basically there's 3 parts. And I'm just going to quickly recap about buildings as batteries. And then these parts 2 and 3 are actually this Energy Club lecture that I gave on Monday last week. I don't know. So those of you, I guess maybe just you, Justin. I don't know. Anybody else who was there at the Energy Club meeting? Okay. So these are distilled from a public lecture for the Energy Club last week. So again, there's ProBeer and I celebrating in front of Pew Hall, and this looks awful, but it's just because we don't have good power measurement sensors, and I don't know why it's so noisy, but it's trivial. You could track a say Reg D perfectly. I'm glad you're here, Joel, because I'm going to go in. You all have to sign non-disclosure agreements with me. I'm going through all these patents, basically. But it sounds trivial. You turn a knob up and down, the fan speed, obviously you're adjusting the power. But again, the mapping between fan speed and power is very nonlinear, and you don't want to have to exactly model that for every building. So a feedback loop there solves the problem. So you can have you can have a fan. Again, I said this last time, but it's really worth saying. And you have a set point, and you have the actual fan speed is one output, but what you care about is power, delta P, because that's what you're selling to PJM. And to make sure that you track you want my deviation in power to track PJM's regulation signal exactly. And so you can get away with a really crappy model of the fan as long as you close the loop. And again, I said this last time, it's Florida that did this, that said you've got to have local control loops so you can track a reg signal perfectly. And all the work that was done at Los Alamos National Lab, I mean, at Lawrence Berkeley National Labs and elsewhere, they never had this insight, and so they never tracked signals. Nobody has tracked signals like we have. Nobody's done this, even as crappy as that looks. But again, that's measurement noise. It's not reality. Okay, and so forget that. So the thing is that there's a huge capacity. So the fans in Florida could provide the Reg D signals for, for all of the U.S. probably. What's that? Yeah. But that's a fairly high frequency signal. I mean, again, these are in minutes. Again, on power system scales, that's high frequency. It's the highest frequency signal that PGM cares about. Up a few minutes, down a few minutes. All right. And that's not the major issue. I mean, this became a hot topic after FERC Order 755 because suddenly there was a lot of money for it. The grid operators needed it, but now they've got it. Because PGM only needs 400 megawatts of that. Buildings can do it, batteries can do it, done. But there's a lot more the grid needs. Okay. All right. So what about other loads? So here are some loads of high risk. Those fluorescent lights, I don't think I want to use them for demand, but I wouldn't call this flexible loads. My laptop, my computer, let's just leave it alone. But also, I don't want to make you cry, but every university in the world has a grad student working on electric vehicles to control the grid. Every single university. I mean, and I think it's a terrible waste of energy. I mean, I get up at 2 in the morning, because of a disaster. I go to my car and I find out the cloud is regulating my, using my car, and I don't have a car. I mean, it's just, I don't understand the obsession with electric vehicles. Again, if it's a commune, okay, if there's 100 cars and I get to take the best car, the one that's fully charged, that's a resource. And also in the future, it may be that gas stations are replaced by battery swapping stations, like the way we swap out our propane tanks. Instead of refilling them, we just swap them out. Maybe we drive in, a robot swaps out our battery, and we go on. Then you got a rack of batteries. That's a resource. That's an image. But this obsession with individuals being faced with so much risk. I'm not going to do research on that. I just don't buy it.
Wait, so what about electric vehicles you think is high risk?
Oh, but think about yourself. You want to go to that car and know that it's ready for you. You don't know when you're going to need that car. When you're going to get an obsession for Chick-fil-A and need that car to go
so
get it.
You're assuming that if they need to, their demand response will turn off the charging stalls.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is, the grid operator wants a reliable resource. Like here, we're tracking a regulation signal. And they're going to want to be able to use that car. And
wouldn't that be assuming that the electric vehicles are taking up a large amount of electricity?
Well, they do. They're massive loads. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think if you compare it to if you had 100 cars,
yeah,
maybe. But if you had 10 or 15.
No, talking about the risk to the consumer, an individual consumer. So there's a real fear today that if everybody in my neighborhood got an electric car and we all came home at once and plugged in our Teslas, the feeder transformer would blow up. That's fear number one. So the grid operators do want to have some control over how these batteries are charged. But then now we're talking about virtual batteries. And these are real batteries, of course, but use them for regulation. And if the grid operator is using all these cars for regulating supply-demand balance, some of these cars are going to be undercharged, and I hope it's not mine when I need it.
But isn't it like a really marginal percentage that it would be? It's not like
all it takes is one person who's one person who's pregnant and about to deliver and doesn't have a car.
But even then, with their cars, it's not like it's a 0 to 100 difference.
I mean,
it'd be like 85
yeah,
instead
it's
of 95.
You could maybe manage the risk if you really just use a tiny bit of the capacity. You're right. There's a capacity risk trade-off. So if you only use 5% of the battery, then you'd reduce the risk almost to nothing. but then it wouldn't be a very big resource. Yeah, I think that's always going to be the case. There's a risk-capacity trade-off. Good point. I think that's universal. But to me, it's just there's so many bigger, easier, low-hanging fruit. So water pumping, water heaters, water cooling. I actually, some of the things that it doesn't involve water. I don't know why I got stuck in.
So I'm sorry, I was understanding it incorrectly. You're saying that a lot of universities use electric vehicle charging stations as a demand, as a virtual load.
No, I'm talking graduate students have been given this task to envision a world in where everybody has an electric car and everyone's signed up to allow the electric car to regulate the grid.
That's stupid.
Yeah, but it's the repetition of labor is what's really stupid, is that there's a few graduate students, I'm sure there's 10 graduate students at this university who are working on that problem. I don't know why it's an obsession, and every university in the country, there are graduate students working on that problem. It's an important problem to regulate the vehicles, because they could do a lot of damage. Again, imagine, everybody comes home at 6 p.m., everyone plugs in a Tesla at the same time, wham, the shock to the grid of the load. That's an issue, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about virtual loads as batteries, how to come up with virtual storage. And electric vehicles as a flexible load, they're not that flexible. That's my concern. When I come home, I want my car charged. I don't have much flexibility. I know people are impatient, right? I mean, they just are. So, but these things you never even know it. There's in this university you don't ever see them. There's these huge chiller tanks. They consume tons of energy as you keep the water cold. Do you think you'd care if that temperature was deviating a degree? You would never notice it. I mean, and water heaters. You keep the temperature within some range, a range that you'll never notice. And water pumping for irrigation, for sanitation, if your poop gets delayed a little bit before going off to Hogtown Creek, you're not going to mind too much. So one challenge is that a lot of these loads have discrete operating points, so either on or off. And this is a big challenge, apparently. And but in a way, it's not that different than a battery. Like I mentioned, lithium-ion batteries that you can discharge them in 2 minutes, but then when you charge them up, you have to wait 30 minutes. So you've got these big temporal constraints. So like. Of course, there's a whole range of behavior. You don't have to discharge in 2 minutes. You could discharge in 5 minutes. But there's a lot of constraints on behavior, and especially at charge time. So if you took these types of behavior for a lithium-ion battery, and you wanted to get a group of lithium-ion batteries to track smoothly some sort of regulation signal from the grid, it looks like a combinatorial nightmare, doesn't it? To expect this constraint that takes 30 minutes to recharge once you discharge. It looks like you'd have to, just have a horrible job doing this. And that's why when I spoke to people at Innovari, this company that does this stuff, they're interested in this business. I mentioned this before, I think. So the chief technical officer told me he considers this a Tetris game. Just a few weeks ago. I mean, that you're going to stack up these rectangles and try to fill in a curve. The Tetris is a game where you drop blocks, and and that's a combinatorial problem, which I don't like combinatorics. I avoid them. So basically, what I want to do is do this in 2 phases. So first of all, I just want to talk about a general approach to thinking about this, and I'm really laughing because this plot comes from joint work with Joel here. And first I'm going to talk about a general way of thinking about this, and then talk about, maybe try to explain how you deal with on-off loads. And I don't know if I can get away with this or not. I'll do my best. It's going to be tough. But first, the easy part. So it's basically when you talk about as a frequency decomposition, that it's already being done today. PGM has reg A, reg D, And they're distinguished in many ways, but in one big way is by frequency. So first of all, they're both higher frequency signals, and reg D is a higher frequency than reg A. So it's already done today. But they should do much more of this. So basically this picture says it all. I mean, basically taking and decomposing some disturbance into higher and lower frequency components is what I want to get at. Okay. So, but also a little bit of hype here in terms of how I envision the future. You know, that we have this power grid that we've modeled. We spent a few weeks modeling. And now you all know about control because you've done it. You designed a PI compensator.
Yeah, I was like trying to figure out if I can make it into a PID, but
No, I don't think the D is going to help you for this system. I don't think D is going to help. I think I couldn't see it. The only reason you'd use PID or anything is if you were trying to go for super high bandwidth. But that's where the power grid uncertainty is so great that I'd be scared to do that. Again, I do not know how ERCOT does it. If that's what their grid transfer function really looks like, how on earth do they regulate the grid? I don't know.
for the auction.
Well, it's the auction. That's right. Economics does it. You don't need PID when you've got an auction.
Dollars.
But I do think that, I think that batteries and flywheels and gas turbine generators will be important for a long, long time. But I do think that we're going to have loads that are going to supply a lot of the regulation. And Florida Power and Light agrees, Innovar agrees, a lot of people agree. And this joke here is just this local feedback loops will be used locally and maybe globally as well. Sometimes you'll have information sent back to the balancing authority. So maybe if there's 1 million pools being used, the pools will send some information to the balancing authority. It's possible. I don't know. There's an information architecture which is a total open problem. Nobody knows exactly what it should be. Maybe you don't need control at all like this. Maybe the pools or the water heaters will just stare at the frequency and take care of things on their own. I believe it's possible. And I believe it's possible because you can get away with murder at low frequencies with control. Remember, that was the main lesson I was trying to teach you with control. You just crank up the gain at low frequencies. You don't have to think at all. There's a crossover frequency where you really have to shape things and be careful. But at low frequencies, you just crank up the gain. So why can't pools and water heaters do that if they're at a low frequency range, if they're far from the crossover frequency? Now, those are dangerous words, okay? This is a conjecture. Anybody in power would just scream at me at this point, because that's totally, but let's find out. I don't know. That's future research. Okay, so anyway, today PGM looks at, breaks up regulation sales based on frequency, and I think we should do this in a much more broad way. So let's get some examples. So this is this duck curve that's so feared in California. So you've seen this, I think. Dave, have you seen this? Maybe not. You've seen it because it was in my talk. Anyway, so that green curve is actually the emergence of the duck in California. So the fact that the power, this is in March of last year, the power actually goes down now on sunny days because there's so much solar power. It goes down. But then two things happen at once. It's hot in the afternoon and the sun's going down. There's a big thermal lag. So that sun created a lot of heat, which is still in the buildings. So the air conditioners are going crazy and the sun's gone. So you have a big load and no sun. So the orange is the total load and the green is the load minus solar. Okay? And they're only scared about that ramp. And this is real data. At the peak of that ramp, the prices in California shot up to almost $1,000 a megawatt hour when they're normally 20. Because of a ramp. No shortage of power, just a ramp. And that's happening all over the country. And it's not, it just shows that markets are stupid. Sorry, California, but it's true, that's true. And so in the same thing in, there's a link you can go to. So this is actually from Midwest ISO. It should be stated there that in the Midwest they're begging FERC for new rules because prices shoot up even though they've got lots of energy. They just can't ramp fast enough, and prices shoot up because of ramping constraints. Okay, and so So let's look at this is an idealized ramp in the future in California. So this is like what a duck curve would look like in California in another 5 years. You know, basically I say maybe just 5 years, yeah, because the load is 30 gigawatts, but you have 20 gigawatts of sun. So right here, it's because it's only 10 gigawatts because it's 20 gigawatts of sun. That's reasonable, because they're getting it from not just California but Arizona, which has tons of solar power, right? And that thing there just terrifies grid operators today in California. And again, I've mentioned this before. I told you this before. They have a market for ramp up. They have an auction for this slope today in California, and they have an auction for that. It's separate markets. So they're nuts. They're completely nuts. Do you agree? I mean, and someday maybe you'll send me an email proving me wrong, okay? Please do. Okay, so here's how an engineer would do it. First of all, you put this through a low-pass filter. And you notice it's non-causal. This is going down before this thing bent down. Why would I make it non-causal? Don't answer that. A non-causal filter that predicts the future. All right. So here it is, 3 a.m. I'm already going down. I know it's going to be sunny. I trust my weatherman or woman. You know, I know it's going to be sunny. I've got, you know, weather forecasts are really, really reasonable. So I've got a really good forecast of this duck in advance. And I can revise it, you know, but I can schedule, I can do my scheduling of power so that I can say, pretend the duck is this beautiful smooth curve and not this pointy monster, all right? And that smooth curve can be provided by traditional generation sources, okay? And maybe some loads as well. I mean, I can ask loads to, you know, I can use a combination of loads in generation, but let's just say that's generation. And nobody's going to scream about that. The slope there is not nearly as bad as that. And if generation says, no, that slope is still too big, well, then we'll put it through a more extreme low-pass filter. Okay?
Is it safe to assume, though, that you can trust instrumentation for
Well, it's a feedback loop, so we'll have additional feedback loops, you know?
So would it ever come to a point where we predict that a certain amount of solar power will be given, but in actuality, significantly less or significantly more?
Well, I think over all of California and Arizona, no. I think that you've got, you know, I think that the error forecasts are a few percent, you know, locally for sure. We're talking about a large region.
But this would only be in an area where the weather is predictable.
Well, yeah, but any place, I mean, any of these big balancing authorities, any ISO in the U.S., yeah.
I mean, like
an island, yeah.
I think Miami, or South Florida at least, that the weather is too erratic.
No, but it's the whole state, you know, it's going to be, like, you know, the power, you know, this is distributed throughout Georgia. It's all connected. There's no island in this part of the country.
So you're saying as long as there's, but then that means the solar panels have to be in a place.
Well, yeah, there's only a place where there's a lot of solar. So once, if you had solar all over Florida, then it would look like this. It would create a duck curve like this. But if it was over a large region, you'd be able to predict it with high precision. You know, the low frequency part, not the variations around that. You know. So in reality, you know, the actual net load is something that's very, very, has a high frequency components as well because of clouds and all that. But the low frequency component you can predict with high accuracy. Right? And then after that, there's a feedback loop, and any errors can be managed, you know, just like an airplane. So like in the flight control analogy, this is the route planning, you know, and I'm going around a hurricane or whatever storm. The storm might be, I might find out it's a little further away than I thought. Well, then I'll have to go a little dip down a little further than I thought, you know, so it's like that. So, and then there it is. So basically you can take the remainder of this. So this dashed line, the dotted line, and the green line, if you add them up, you get the duck curve, you know. And these are zero energy services. So these can be obtained from batteries, you know, or virtual batteries. And it's the frequency decomposition which is really, really crucial. That this dashed line is good for one kind of batteries. I'll give you an example in a bit. And the green is for different kind of batteries and virtual batteries. And maybe real batteries. If batteries become cheap, then we'll do it. And again, if you had lithium-ion batteries, trying to get them to follow a smooth curve when they have such strange discharge behavior sounds like a challenge, but I'll give you one approach to addressing that. All right, there's one example. Here's another one. So here I used a non-causal filter because I knew in advance it's going to be sunny, and I knew how sunny. I have weather forecasts. Here's a contingency. So things are going along great. It's 6 a.m. I don't know how it happened. There was a 4 gigawatt loss. I cooked up this number in the middle of the night. I wish I had made it 1 gigawatt, but I don't know how you'd lose a 4 gigawatt loss. I don't think that happens. Can you think of a scenario? I guess that Indiana thing was almost that big. That Indiana generator, yeah. But what you do here, you can't use a non-causal filter, but you can use a causal filter. And why would I overshoot like that? Any thoughts? I'll go back over here. Like here, you notice I'm a little under here and I'm over there, and I did in such a way that my residual is zero energy. So yeah, I've answered the question. Yeah, I should let you answer the question.
What was the answer to that?
All right, so you weren't listening. So now you have to answer it. So why have I gone over here, overshot? That's the question. Here's a hint.
Energy.
I want zero energy. So some batteries are going to have to discharge in this region to fill in the gap. And then the batteries will have to be charged. Because you can't just discharge these batteries, or virtual batteries, and just leave them discharged. So the reason you're going to get what people call rebound is because you have to recharge the batteries. So I want the error, the difference between the low frequency part and the high frequency, and the thing I'd like to track, I want it to be zero energy. Because then I'm going to get this. You know? So basically, again, the sum of this dashed line and all these other signals are the step function. And now I've broken down to more frequencies. So there's a mid pass, and the green is high pass, and there's a super high pass purple thing here, which, like buildings could take care of that, or big capacitors, or batteries, anything you want. This blue thing here is a bit harder. It's a big damn battery. I mean, 4 gigawatts, a few hours. That's a gigawatt hour battery. Or something, 2 gigawatt hour battery. Forget it. All right. Okay, are you with me? Okay. So again, think about I've already told you that the super high frequency thing can be taken care of with fans in commercial buildings, no problem at all. And they could also be with ordinary batteries. This would be a massive battery if you use traditional storage. So again, because in this whole region here, it's discharging. That's what this is. And if you take the area of that curve, I assume it's around 2 gigawatt hours of energy. So that's horrible. I mean, we were talking about 32 megawatt hours with 6 acres in San Diego. All right.
Here, the super high frequency is on the order of
minutes, yeah. So that purple there, of course, I'm trying to exactly track that. So we're not going to exactly track it really, but the purple thing is going to be in the order of minutes. It'll be like Reg D. That's how I set this up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What are the key advantages we're gaining behind storing energy in batteries particularly? Or this is the only way we have?
Well, the thing is, the question is, why would we, what's the advantages and disadvantages of batteries? We've gone through this. First of all, if that's a 2 gigawatt hour battery, I want to see it. Now, a battery, a lithium-ion battery, or a nickel metal hydride battery, it doesn't exist. And maybe someday it will, but today it would cost I can't even get my head around it. It would cost billions of dollars, many billions of dollars, and you'd have to use half of California for the land. and you'd have to have massive cooling. You know, you'd have to spread it out because it would generate heat, and then you'd lose energy because of that. And then they wear out. After so many cycles, you have to go and rebuild them. You know, so I mean, the thing is that maybe they'll come up with better technology in the future. Memory used to be expensive. You know, it used to be you'd pay hundreds of dollars for 100 I can't even say it, kilobytes of storage. You know, so maybe there'll be improvements in the future. But today, this is absurd to get this from a traditional battery. You could get this from like water pumping, you know, using dams, something like that. So you could, you know, discharge the dam a little bit faster, and then, you know, and then this would be pumping water back up, recharging recharging quotes the dam. But there, maybe you lose 25% round trip, so you'd be a very leaky battery for water pumping. Here's one more example, which I think I might have shown before. I don't know. This example of how to deal with the wind in the Pacific Northwest. Maybe not. Cool. So this is 1 week in the Pacific Northwest this year, and actually I did this because of a lecture in Hawaii last January. I just grabbed the data. I gave a talk on the 7th of January. I grabbed the data from this week. And you see on New Year's Day, the generators were recovering from their party. The wind was recovering from the parties the day before. I don't know. There was no wind at all on New Year's Day. It shot up, it came down. Now again, they're scared of ramps, you know, they're scared of the slope. So suppose we wanted to, hypothetically, we had exact 4 gigawatt load. How would we address this? So we want to use all the wind energy that's here, which is sometimes 0, but sometimes significant. Sometimes we almost get to 4 gigawatts, right? You know, so here, at this point on the 5th of January at 10 a.m., or whatever that is, we need almost no additional energy, you know, to meet this goal of 4 gigawatts. But on New Year's Day, we need a generator to supply full 4 gigawatts. And how would you do this? Well, you would flip this around. You know, basically, this is the net load curve. You know, the net load is 4 gigawatts because there was no wind initially, and then it comes down. It comes down a lot more. And traditional generators are doing this, but they don't like it. Hydro generators are doing it. They're ramping up and down, and they're threatening to sue every minute. And they've stopped producing more wind in that area. They can't handle the ramps. You know, they don't have the resources. But you just do the same thing. So we can go through, again, a non-causal filter. I accidentally created a boundary effect here in doing this. It's a mistake. It's just, it's like my filter is pretending this went down to 0 and stayed there. I made a mistake, but just ignore that, okay? I should have taken more data, you know, which is. And then you go through to the same thing. I've got a mid-pass signal and a high-pass signal. And you can all see what I'm saying here. This might be a little lower frequency than we'd like for the fans, but we could do it. And this looks a bit scarier, the purple part, because that would be a massive battery again. That's, you know, maybe the one in San Diego could handle it. Maybe that's 32 megawatt hours. I don't know. But you see what I'm getting at, right? So the hydro generators would not be at all upset about that, except that they don't get to supply energy anymore. They're really angry that they have to give up that sale of energy there and that sale of energy there. But in terms of the engineering and supplying that signal, big deal. They don't care at all. So there it is. So where do you find the resources? Let's do it. Yeah. And there it is. So basically, there's going to be a load, like a refrigerator, a pool pump, a water heater, something like that. There'll be some local control, like I had for the fan. And it's going to involve some state measurements. So here, the only state measurement was a power deviation. But for a refrigerator, it's going to be the temperature of that fridge. You know, you don't want that fridge getting warm. Things like that. And the I there is because you have to think about a large number of loads. So I'm going to focus on loads that are either on or off. And one load can't track a regulation signal, then it's either on or off. And that's sort of the miracle, that you can actually make this work. And a plug for my co-author, Anna Busic, who was actually here last week. So there it is. The EC department says Sean Mine wins Google Research Award. It was a joint award with Anna Busic, who's an awesome co-author. So, and yeah, and it was actually the title of this. We actually had to send in a title for our award. And I like the title. I noticed it again. Distributed Control for Renewable Integration in Smart Communities. That sounds cool, doesn't it?
They're all words that Google likes.
Yeah. Okay, so how do you get these resources? It's easy. So traditional generation and, what else? I don't know. And so the purple in Florida, my God, we've got it made. Pool pumps will do it, I mean, gigawatt load. I mean, that's amazing. Sanitation has a lot of water pumping as well, and it's flexible. And the blue part here is fancy commercial HVAC is one possibility. So no batteries at all, really. Now, again, the fan's capacity varies with time, so we probably want to augment with batteries. But maybe you don't need to. It's a question. Because the capacity is so huge in buildings that maybe it's okay that the capacity varies with time. It's an open question. So it doesn't have to be this. It's just these are very, very low-hanging fruits, and especially in Florida where they've already got the information, that the architecture. I mean, Florida Power and Light has got their hands on the switch of every pool in their domain. It's wild. I want to find out.
Just whispering.
Okay. All right.
Just make sweet. You mentioned a few times how capacity and fans is a problem, like the variability of trying.
Oh no, like on a daily basis. Like at night, the air intake requirements for a building are different in the daytime. So the daytime, we're opening doors all the time, and that messes with the HVAC system, and so that the amount you can play with the fans is less at night than the daytime. It's a very predictable variation, so I don't know if it's a big deal. The research questions here. That's all. My gut feeling is it's not going to be a big deal because look at how horrible generators have been in the past, and yet the grid was so robust. Coal generators were giving the worst possible performance in their AGC, and yet it worked great. So if it's that robust, then we can probably get away with some uncertainty from these resources. And I don't know if it's that much uncertainty. Okay, so this term demand dispatch that I threw in the title, that was coined in a sort of vision article by some Google employees in 2010. The paper itself doesn't have a lot of content, but it's dead on the way I see the world. It's that get these consumers out of the loop. Don't let them mess with this grid. You install this equipment on the pool pumps or water heaters or whatever, and you do not let them touch it. And part of the contract is if they do touch it, they'll get a fine. They'll get beaten up. I don't know. What do you do? Just list them as a pedophile on Facebook or something? Because they're hurting the grid. They're hurting the grid. It's bad. It's just ridiculous to think that consumers can mess with the grid. I mean, we don't do that. Anyway, the power consumption loads is very automatic continuously to provide service to the grid without impacting QRS to anybody. We don't, if they agree to it, yes, we'll get more capacity if we do, and we'll give them a bigger incentive. But there's a contract in place. If you let me muddle with your equipment and keep as long as I keep your QoS in some band, like your temperature in some region, you'll get some incentive. Everyone's happy. And that's the only way you can create a virtual battery. If we couldn't have created this feedback loop and stuck it in the building, which is part of the building automation system, we could not have had the success we had at Pew Hall. It would have been impossible. Okay, so let's go. So here's like what I would say if you're gonna create virtual storage from loads, here are the ingredients you have to respect. And one is this high quality ancillary service. Does the deviation in power consumption accurately track the desired target, and that local control is necessary. And reliability is each day and in years from now, and that's a big thing. I mean, so that's why you want to sign contracts with consumers, and you want them to be nice for a long time. So capacity might vary with time as long as it's predictable. Cost effective, there's installation, communication, maintenance, environmental, and who knows, maybe some of this will actually create energy costs. We don't, you have to check on that. And then there's, of course, there's QoS constraints, and this is always ignored by academics. It's amazing. They say, look, we were able to curtail a gigawatt of power. They ignore the fact that, that several women gave birth in the parking lot. I mean, really, it's amazing. So you've got to, because there'll be a revolt if you don't respect consumers' expectations. And I give a list here. Pools clean, fresh fish, blah blah blah, farm irrigation, and data centers again are something. People talk about data centers, but that's an area of high risk as well, because they're super efficient. You don't have a lot of playroom in a data center. They use a lot of energy, but not that much. Yeah.
And they're starting to become like not regulated by utilities anymore. Like I know that Amazon is starting their own utility company just to run the data banks.
Yeah, right. Google's got. I know that Google is setting up big data centers in Oregon just as a deal because they'll get cheap power.
Apparently, they just put huge fans in caves.
Oh yeah, right. That's awesome.
It's crazy.
It's amazing amount of energy.
100-foot turbines just blowing cold air.
Yeah.
So.
And they've got them in Minnesota where it's cold, so that But it is fun to think about flexibility and computation. Can I compute in Arizona when it's sunny and in Minnesota when it's windy? I don't know. It's fun. I don't know. Maybe that would be a fun thing to think about. But anyway, so virtual energy storage is what my goal is, and demand dispatch is a way to get there. And so basically, and you need this distributed control. So I'm terrified now to even try to explain this. Oh, good, I'm out of time. But I think it's worth spending some time on this. Maybe I don't know. Let me say a few words because we are going to be kicked out of here in a few minutes. So. So, in my mind, there has to be two parts to. You've got a load. There's some state measurements, like is a unit on or off? What's the temperature of the fridge? How long since the last cycle? Because we're trying to avoid too much cycling. This could be a big, long vector for you, something as simple as a fridge. And the local control will have at least two parts. I'm sure there'll be a pre-filter because there's a certain frequency range that a load can handle. And I love the example of a fridge. Here's the power consumption of one fridge. Do you all agree with me that 1 million fridges could track the signal? Yes. If you could just get them all to synchronize, they could track the signal. And so you could all imagine they could track 1 million fridges could track a signal that's close to this, maybe a sine wave, of a similar frequency. And basically that's the thing. There's a nominal frequency of a particular load like a fridge. And as long as you stay near that nominal frequency, you can track in that range, in that frequency band. And so I think a frequent pre-filter will be useful for that. You couldn't get a fridge to track this signal, 1 million fridges to track this signal, because this would entail turning a bunch of them off, a lot of fridges off for a whole day. I wouldn't want to do that. I wouldn't want to smell the fridge afterwards. So
you could do that, right?
Very, very low frequencies. You could, but at very low capacity.
Right, you just turn on one and turn off one at the same time.
But you end up, if you do the calculations, you find you have very low capacity. So fridges can provide low frequency regulation, much lower than the nominal frequency, but a tiny fraction of their maximum load. Well, at the nominal frequency, they can track, if this is a kilowatt, you had 1 million fridges, there'd be a gigawatt of regulation at this frequency. At a low frequency, it might only be a kilowatt. Yeah. And so pre-filter, though, can help to respect those constraints. But then there's this decision process, which is really tough. How do you make decisions based on a regulation signal? So zeta t is this regulation signal. It was called rho of t in the course earlier, sorry. It's a regulation signal from the balancing authority. And given that this is an on-off device, say, what are we talking about? And that's hard. And I claim you have to use randomized policies. You have to have coin flips. And it's a perfect time to run. So if you're interested, I'll go into it next time. I knew this would be too rushed. But you have, and this has been recognized before. So when in the very first days of multiple access communication, they tried to basically do this. Whenever there's congestion, send out signals and tell people to back off. What happened? Everybody would back off, and there'd be a jolt to the system, and then what happens? You tell people, well, it's okay now to send. Everyone blasts out signals. You get synchronization. And the way they solved this in Hawaii, this is where it first was an issue, was using randomization. So they didn't let people instantly start sending again. They sent with some probability. If there's a collision, they had to back off for some period of time, and they could resend with some probability. And it worked. There was a capacity loss, but it was a way of having very, very simple protocols to allow everybody to communicate. Okay? Now, that was the early days of communication, and a lot of more sophisticated ideas have come in. But randomization is a beautiful, beautiful way to avoid synchronization of behavior, which is what you don't want, because you don't want to track this. That's not the goal. You don't want the fridges to synchronize. You want them to track some regulation signal. And it's basically a degree of freedom, randomization. I'll try to explain this next time. I won't spend too much time on it, but I don't want to rush through the rest of it. So we'll go through it next time. Until then.